Hi, welcome back to my channel. It's Miss Kellie Michele, and today I have a guest with me. This is Dominique Walker. Say hi, Dominique.
Hey, how's it going? I appreciate you inviting me to the channel today. Definitely excited to really just share my experience and have a great conversation today.
Okay, cool. All right, so Dominique is going to talk about multifamily buildings and property. So basically, he owns several multifamily buildings. He is actually in California, but he purchases his properties in Chicago because that's his hometown. So he's going to talk a little bit about that. He also runs short-term rentals out of his multifamilies and long-term rentals. So he does a combination of both. So we'll talk a little bit about all of that and a little bit more, okay? All right, so Dominique, let's start with how did you decide to invest in multifamily buildings?
You know what? That's a great question. I really initially made my segue into real estate back in 2017. And, I kind of started off a little smaller, just like, maybe the average, investor, how they get started off in the industry. I initially started off with a smaller condo. And with my transition into multifamily, what had actually happened is it was a big, tragedy that happened with my condo that I purchased in 2017. It was a huge, I would just say, a flood within the unit, and I had to pretty much get the entire unit mitigated, get the entire unit remodeled as well. And with that being said, I just was not comfortable putting another long-term tenant in that space.
Mhm.
And I also quickly understood that, hey, if something this tragic happens to a single family, property or a condominium, that you are immediately left without rent,
Mhm.
because you only have one person responsible to make that payment, on a monthly basis. So just that situation of, strong adversity through a remodel and a flood really kind of turned my thinking into a different direction of, hey, how could I scale up to having a multifamily property where I have several tenants living under one roof, under one mortgage, to really kind of just help me out from a liability standpoint. And also, hey, how could I, really just maximize the profits, just from just from a financial standpoint? Because if you're only focusing on one tenant, that's paying the monthly rent, when you
Mhm.
transition to when you transition to short-term rentals, the income there is, maybe 4 or 5 times the income that you can kind of see from a long-term one tenant, contract. So that's kind of how I really got into real estate, and also how I transitioned from just really focusing on single family and condominium rentals to multifamily and short term.
Okay. All right. So when did you buy your first multi family building?
My first multifamily building was purchased in June of 2020. So this was a 5-unit commercial deal. For those that may not know the difference between commercial and residential, anything above 5 units, so 5 units and up is considered um, commercial real estate. And also, there's different parameters that come with that in regards to down payment, and in regards to how you acquire that property as well. But my first property was in 2022, and that was a multifamily in 2020. Excuse me.
Okay. All right. So with that property, the 5-unit property, you started doing some short-term rentals out of that as well as long-term rentals. So tell us about the difference between the two and why you chose to do that.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just jump right in. When I first purchased that property in 2020, the property was, fully occupied. It had 5 tenants in it. It was a 5-unit property. It was really, really all set up to be turnkey, at that point.
Mhm.
When I initially purchased a property, I purchased it for $500,000. It was a 9 cap when I purchased it. And my only concern was, upon purchase, yes, it was turnkey. I still felt like I wasn't getting the cash flow that I needed to get out of that property from a return on investment standpoint. So if I'm spending a $500,000 and the rent rolls around $5,500 a month, I was looking to see more around 7,000, and to actually get me closer towards that number, I just had to, really just think about some non-traditional things to get me to that number, because it was still a great building and it was still an amazing location, and a great asset for me. So what I end up doing is still moving forward to purchasing that 5-unit building. Like I said, I have 5 tenants in there that were actually long-term tenants, very great tenants, paying on time. But an opportunity came up with one of my lower level units, and this was a 2-bedroom. The rest of the units are 1-bedrooms, correct? So once that opportunity came up, I kind of had to step back and say, okay, this is a young lady, a professional hairdresser. She also has a daughter. And at that moment, I wanted to really just say, hey, I don't want to, give them the boot and kind of kick them out. Maybe I want maybe I want to, give them some options on, how they can kind of be relocated, maybe to one of my other properties, or to one of my mentors' properties in the area. So what I end up doing is kind of getting into contact with another owner down the street. He actually had a couple more 2-bedroom listings that were actually available, and I actually offered her literally her deposit back, and also an additional financial incentive to actually leave the unit as quick as possible, so I could really start getting in there and kind of just turning the unit into a short-term rental, for that 2-bedroom. So that's kind of how I transitioned from literally acquiring a 5-unit long-term tenant commercial building,
Mhm.
and strongly transitioning that space into not only long-term tenants, but also I would say, a short-term, Airbnb rental as well in that building.
So once you did that transition, what were the results as far as, can you compare what you were getting from that long-term tenant to the short-term rental, like in 1 month?
Yeah, and like I say, with everybody that's interested in long-term rentals and short terms, there are going to be advantages on both ends, right? There are going to be disadvantages on both ends, and I can kind of walk through some of the advantages of kind of just transitioning that one unit into a short-term rental. So my actual leasing contract to that long-term tenant was a $1,300 rent payment every single month. She was paying 1325, and she was a great tenant. She paid on time. Maybe a couple of months she was, maybe 5 or 6 days late, but never 30, 60 days late, right?
Mhm.
So it was definitely a, tough for me to kind of just make that decision to really just go strictly short-term rental. And obviously there was a guaranteed $1,300, correct?
Right.
That I was walking away from. So the great part about short-term rentals, you can actually go on airdna.com, and you can kind of type in your zip code and really kind of do that research yourself and say, hey, based on where my property is, here's how much I can bring in a month. Here's how much I can charge a night, and here's how much or what my occupancy rate is going to be for the month. So with that data, I was able to be a little bit more comfortable to just really just go out there and just make that decision to short-term rentals. So within the first 2 months, the first month I got around like $1,700, just because I was just getting it off the ground.
Mhm.
But month two and month three, I was seeing 2,100, 2,500, almost doubling what I was seeing from a long-term, $1,300 rent payment. You know what I'm saying? So at that moment, I had to take a step back and say, okay, now based on my learnings, I've turned the unit into a short-term rental space.
Mhm.
I've taken my monthly rents from 5,500 all the way up to about $7,000 to where I want it to be.
Mhm.
And now this actually increased the property value on my commercial building, right? Because
Right.
with commercial real estate, the income is highly, excuse me, the value is highly dependent on the income of the building. So
Mhm.
I think it was a win-win overall. Like I said, I'm receiving higher rents just by transitioning one tenant out and leaving the other four as long-term tenants.
So right now, is it still the same way, or have you transitioned other units over into short-term rentals in that building?
No, I made a decision to leave the other four, just as short-term rentals. They're all great tenants. They all pay on time. The main, I guess, indication for me was my two-bedroom. My two-bedroom was on the bottom floor, and when you actually move into kind of just like, or I would say when you actually acquire a multifamily building and you want to turn a couple units or one unit into a short-term rental space, you
Mhm.
want to think about like, okay, now I also have to think about the other community, my neighbors. Are
Yeah.
they going to be, bothered? How can I manage the short-term rental space without bothering my long-term tenants, right? Because those are your bread and butter tenants. They're
Mhm.
gonna pay every single month. So, with that being said, it's still a short-term rental space, but like I said, there's some disadvantages as well when you have different type of guests coming from out of state. uh, their noise might not be the noise that your long-term tenants are used to, right? So you may receive a little bit more complaints. You have to actually sharpen up on your process on how they're checking in. What are the ground rules for that property? Can they stand outside and smoke? Is that bothering your other tenants? So
Mhm.
I think the advantages are for sure the income, but the disadvantages are, you're definitely going to have to put in some more hours property management wise, just making sure everybody is on the same page and also respectful of the other people in the community.
Okay, cool. All right.
Yep.
So you were thinking of, well, no, let me stop here because
Yeah.
one more point I want to make before we move further. So, how is it managing your property from California in Chicago?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say with anybody that's, trying to make that step into, hey, landing that first investment property or going to secure an out-of-state rental. um, there's a couple different steps and a couple different strategies that made me feel a lot more comfortable, with making that step. And one is really just landing a mentor who's already in that space, who already invest out of state. So you need somebody that can be under your wheelhouse and give you that insight on which way to turn, left or right.
Mhm.
Um, Also, number two, when you're in the process of acquiring that property, um, the same way you're going to do a home inspection, when you are actually there at the property, you can do that virtually. There is an additional fee to get a 3D inspection of that property, but you don't physically have to be there to view that property, at all. And then secondly, you know, I kind of really, really, and this is what really made me feel comfortable about investing out of state. Your property management actually has to be very, very reliable, and they have to be properly vetted. You can't just go and choose one property management company and sign a contract with them.
Mhm.
You want to make sure you're going to properly vet these property management companies through mentorship or through proper referrals, just to make sure that, hey, they have the same communication type as you, and they are really just managing up to your standards. So I think with those three things, if you can really narrow down, hey, landing a mentor, really, getting a 3D inspection of the property so you know everything about it, what's right and what's wrong. And then, with me just managing property from California, my property management team is so tight and polished that, literally, I wake up weekly every day and they send me things that, they've completed or that, really are action items for each building. So I think it's doable. I also think with me being in California, my cash flow is a lot stronger than investing in property in California because it's a lot more expensive just from a cash on cash return perspective than the Midwest. So I think I made the right decision and it's been working out pretty great.
Okay, so one thing I want to make sure is clear. You manage the properties yourself first and then got a property management company, or did you get a property management company up front?
Yeah, I think that's a good question as well. Um, with any investor, I would say, hey, you want to kind of, really get your feet wet and understand the true numbers of your business, right?
Hmm.
Before you go out and hire a solid, property management company that, has multiple properties, that has, multiple things on their to-do list on a weekly basis, you want to make sure, hey, um, I understand the cash flow of my property from a seasonal standpoint. I understand that, hey, in the winter, my expenses may be a little bit more higher than the summer, correct?
Hmm.
I may have more expenses from a gas bill standpoint or air conditioner or electricity. You want to understand those true numbers before you actually just jump in and kind of just hand the property off to another company, right?
Yeah.
Also, you really want to understand the behaviors of your tenants. When you're handing, when you acquire a property and just hand it off, you know, you really want to understand that, hey, this tenant has a different type of financial and payment behavior, right? So
Mhm.
you've already been through that, down that road with that tenant. So you kind of already understand why property management is, basically recommending eviction, or why aren't your property managers evicting that tenant?
Okay.
So, I think it's one of those things where, hey, I always tell people if you're new to getting into the game, hey, 6 months managing your own property and knowing your numbers, balancing that spreadsheet and that budget every single month will give you the comfortability to just pass it off to another company if you don't have the bandwidth. Or, hey, in the perfect world, you could really have a turnkey property and understand that, hey, if I pass this off to another company, well, really the only time I really need help with managing this building is maybe it's through the winter. Maybe you just need snow removal, or maybe you just need an extra, hands on deck through the winter time, and maybe you can kind of contract somebody for a specific quarter rather than a full year. But you wouldn't know that, you know, not managing your own property first. So
Yeah.
um, that's
So
that's kind of just my take on that.
yeah, I tell people, so I get people who I do consultations for the midterm rentals, and they're actually in like California or in the New Yorks where, the cost of living is much higher. So they're able to take their money elsewhere to invest. And they're always asking, should they do this out of town? And I'm always telling them, my thing is no. You need to know your business, just like you just explained,
Yep,
before you actually try to turn it over to someone else, so that you know what should be done and what should not be done. So I'm glad you actually made that statement,
for sure.
because it's actually is very much so true. Now, does your property management company manage your short-term rentals, or do you pretty much take care of that part?
Yeah, so I actually found my property management company um, through my short-term rental. My first property that I actually, got in 2017, I found them just as a short-term rental, property management lead. So they were actually in charge of kind of cleaning the property, making sure it was turnkey for the next guest. And also if there was anything damaged or anything broken, they were in charge of that, just like literally from start to finish.
Okay.
Once I saw that they were that hands-on with one single unit, one property, I immediately understood that, hey, I'm doing myself a disservice by not scaling up and making sure that, hey, if I have the capital, if I have the resources built with my commercial lending team, if I have the mentorship, if I have the off-market deals, why am I not taking advantage of more properties, right? So my team, they just literally moved on from that property. They still have people managing my first property, and they're also managing my two other multifamily buildings. So it's working out great. And like I said, I did go through 4 to 5 different, I would just say, property management companies before I ran into these guys, and they just did such a great job. They just sold me on everything. So I'm blessed to have them, and hey, I just plan on to continue, to give them property as I acquire it. So.
Well, that's good, because a lot of management companies who they only want to handle long-term rentals, they don't even want to touch short-term rentals. So that's why I asked you that question.
Yeah.
But so then that means there are some out there, you just have to find them. And that would be pretty much the same for a midterm rental as well, even though there are some differences as far as how you get your people and how you do certain things. They're probably going to be able to manage a midterm rental as well, right?
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and transition, because I know you are interested in getting into midterm rentals or corporate rentals yourself. So are you thinking about changing your short-term rentals over, or are you just thinking about including this into your building so you'll have all three, the short-term, midterm, and long-term rentals?
Yeah, I'll kind of start with what prompted me, and kind of just what pushed me towards the midterm and kind of just like um, longer stay rentals, specifically with traveling nurses and corporate stays. So with Airbnb, if you have a nice property, if you have the property's in a great location, um, without a doubt, your property is going to be booked every single every single weekend, through the week. And you're going to have to really, really have tight property management, and you're going to have tight vetting um, for when these people come into your property. And they have to understand that there are property rules to be followed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't want your long-term tenants to be constantly complaining about this Airbnb unit that's in the basement, right? If you're getting constant complaints, that could cause some of your long-term tenants to make a decision to make an exit out of your property, right?
Right.
And you just don't want that, because that's consistent income. So I had a situation with Airbnb where it's my fault. I will say that I have a specific criteria, and my criteria is I do not list and I do not let local bookings or people who live locally book the unit.
Okay.
And my other requirement is I also do not let people book with no reviews. It's just 2 red flags for me, and I've already been down that road. And typically, when you run into a problem, it's because they're not familiar with Airbnb, they don't have any rules, or they're local guests and they're having like some type of like large party or function. So to make a long story short, I had a big complaint. I had to actually get these guests removed out of the property because they were very disrespectful. Once I got them removed out of the property or called the police, they actually vandalized one of my units, broke things, TVs, etc. To make a long story short, I had to blame myself on that one because I did not stick to my criteria, right?
Right. Okay.
I actually bent a little bit just by saying, okay, well, they don't have any reviews, but they sound like good people when I vetted them on the phone. Well, unfortunately, no, that turned into a situation where my neighbors were very upset at me. And, throughout that process, I just kind of just shot myself in the foot. You know what I'm saying? I did not want, for one, a weekday party to go on in one of my units,
Oh,
bothering a long-term tenant, right? And then also, as a double whammy, I have to go through a claims process with Airbnb. For those who are new to Airbnb, that actually doesn't take a couple of days. That takes weeks. It's going on over a month, before I even receive reimbursement for some of these items. So
I was about to say that's if they reimburse you, and will they give you 100%, all of that.
right. And I still haven't got, pretty much the breakdown of that. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I do I just launched a short-term rental, Airbnb, not an Airbnb, a short-term rental, corporate housing, traveling nurse, one-bedroom unit here in LA. Based on my success with that, I said, you know what? I'm not going to really go through all of the Airbnb short-term 1, 2, or 3 day stays anymore with my Chicago short-term rentals.
Mhm.
So I listed those places on, basically the traveling nurses website and also corporate housing website. And now my plan is to get longer stays with people who, more so are just, staying as a professional. Maybe there's a hospital, locally, maybe they're just there for a contract, but they're not there for a party, right? They're not there for a large function or to bother anybody. So that's my strategy now. And it's really just to make sure I am maintaining some profit, right?
Mhm.
Um, but also being respectful of the other, tenants in the community.
So I know you said you launched the midterm rental in California, so you really can't compare the profit you're making for a short-term rental versus a midterm rental because it's two different markets. So we can't
Yeah,
even talk about that at this point unless you do
I
it in
get you.
Chicago
Yeah.
and see what the difference is. But normally, you do make more money with short-term rentals. I tell everybody that, but you have more management and headaches and wear and tear on the
Yes.
property and different things that, some people don't mind dealing with, some people do mind. So it just depends, right?
Yeah. And, you bring up a great point because I've had to remodel my property. This is, yeah, I've had to do one remodel of the property, and it wasn't a major remodel, but you got to think about it. If you have, you know, two different guests checking in to your property, every single week, two different reservations, you got to think about what's gonna need, replacing, what's gonna need, just just a bit tidying up. I've had to replace like, um, door panels and also like, bathroom fixtures and things like that.
Mhm.
Some things are on the smaller end, but obviously as a long-term tenant, there's not much back and forth and traffic through that unit. So that is a disadvantage when you're thinking about short term. If you own that property, definitely you're going to be remodeling throughout the years.
Now, do you own all of the properties that you use for short-term rental, or do you also do rental arbitrage?
So one of my units in California, again, California is a very expensive and aggressive market to get into. So I actually do rental arbitrage here in California.
Okay.
Everything in Chicago, I actually own. So I'm in full control. I love just the autonomy of it. Versus, with California, you kind of got to go through a couple different, gatekeepers and make sure, you have everybody on the same page.
Yeah, I'm glad you hit on that point because that is the difference between buying and owning. Even though, you can scale faster when you do the rental arbitrage model, but you also
Right.
have to follow someone else's rules. Versus if you own the property, you have your own rules. You might have rules for that
Right.
particular community or something like that, but pretty much you can run it. And that's all it is. And you make more money because you're spending less on your mortgage than you would be on a rent, right?
Yep.
So go ahead.
And I always tell people, I give them a quick example. Everybody's always asking, hey, should I purchase and invest in a property to do Airbnb, or should I go the rental arbitrage route? And I always tell them it just depends on where you're at in your career and your real estate journey. Capital wise, obviously, if you have light capital, obviously starting off in rental arbitrage and kind of gaining that capital
Mhm.
from a month-to-month cash flow standpoint to actually transition into ownership. Hey, that's definitely the key goal, because it's all about generational wealth. If you take a $400,000 property, from an ownership standpoint, every single year you're going to have tenants paying down that $400,000 mortgage by $8,000, right?
Mhm.
From appreciation standpoint, every single year you're going to have an appreciation. Just to be conservative, property appreciates about 3% every year.
Mhm.
So that's $12,000 on an annual basis. From an ownership standpoint, you're able to take advantage of. And then also from a tax advantage standpoint, you can depreciate your properties from an asset standpoint. So every single year on your taxes, you're able to write off, based on a $400,000 property over the life of a 30-year loan, $12,000 a year on your taxes. I mean, that's over $300,000 from taxes, $300,000 from also appreciation. And
Mhm.
then you have another $200,000 that your tenants paid down over the life of that 30-year loan. So now we're talking about upwards almost of $1 million opportunity, right?
Mhm.
When you own a property, plus you may be getting some decent cash flow off that $400,000 property. You may be making $2,500 a month versus going with an Airbnb, you might be making $3,500 a month. Again, more monthly profit, but obviously you're missing out on those tax benefits. Obviously your tenants paying down your mortgage, which is increasing your net worth,
Mhm.
and then also the appreciation. So that's one of those examples where, hey, for early investors, if you're getting started in real estate, you don't have a lot of capital, definitely start off in rental arbitrage, and make sure that goal is obviously acquiring property to build generational wealth.
Yeah. So I do both, of course, rental arbitrage and own properties. And I'm actually just bought another property just to flip so that I can get that
Nice.
money and go buy another property for my midterm rental. So that's
Okay.
that's the goal for that. So yes, that's absolutely right. There are plenty benefits to actually buying the properties. Just everyone's just not in that position, but you can definitely work up and grow into that position. Not only do you get the deductions for the taxes in regards to depreciation, you still get to write off everything you put into the property, the furniture and household items and all of those things, because it's a business. So
Right.
keep that in mind as well. Those are additional deductions that you can get. Now you can still get those with rental arbitrage, but you're not going to get the depreciation part. Everything Dominique just talked about, right?
Yeah, you're 100% right, and I like how you honed in on, hey, these are expenses that you can actually take as a write off because it is a business, right? All of my multifamily properties are closed under an LLC, and with that being said, this is a legal business that operates my multifamily apartment building. So
Mhm.
they're not actually registered under my personal name, protecting me from a liability standpoint. But rather I control the LLC. I own the business, and the properties are actually under that LLC. So obviously there's tax advantages that you can take advantage of, but there's also ways to protect you from a liability standpoint.
Right, right. Okay, so Dominique, tell us about your book. You have written a book. Tell us the name of it and give us more information about it and where people can find it.
Oh, it's called "Don't Wait, Buy Real Estate." It's literally a guide to investing in multifamily commercial real estate. As an early investor, a lot of times, people want to get into the real estate game and purchase out of state rentals, but they just don't know where to start, right? With this book, I really, really kind of outline the key 5 steps and the key 5 things that you really need to know just getting into the game. Really the top 5 things, and also the top 5 things that I wish I would have known before I hopped into the game, right?
Mhm.
Because there's different levels of commercial real estate. There's also, different levels of adversity as well that you can run into while you're acquiring the property, or just throughout you owning that property. So I really wrote this book because there's a lot of power in just uh, sharing the knowledge amongst our Black individuals.
Mhm.
And I just really, really just think, hey, sharing this knowledge is just so key to building generational wealth and just building passive monthly income. So the book can be found on Amazon, and also the ebook can be found in the link in my bio. My Instagram is Deeds with Dom. That's DEEDS with Dom.
Okay. And I
Yep.
am also going to put all of that information in the description below. So don't worry if you did not catch that. I'll make sure it is in the description. So Dominique, hold your book up again so everybody can see.
Love it.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. So if you're interested in multifamily buildings, maybe buying one to use for long-term, short-term, or midterm rentals, you just got some great valuable information from a person who's done it and who is transitioning into
Yep.
midterm rentals. All right. So Dominique, did you have anything else you want to share before we wrap this up?
For sure. Look, the name of my book is called "Don't Wait, Buy Real Estate," and I want to encourage as many people that I can to just really just get into investing, not only in real estate, but whatever lane that you see fit. I really chose multifamily real estate, and that's where I've seen some success. But I just really want to hold in on, hey, don't wait, buy real estate, and also don't be passive about passive income. Um, Passive income has really, really changed my life, just from a freedom and mobility standpoint. I've been able to really, really stay so financially disciplined in my goals, and really transition my earned income into passive income just through the vehicle of real estate. So um, I'm no longer trading time for money. And, I will just say, hey, don't wait, buy real estate, get out there, be aggressive, and reach out to me if you have any questions. Again, my Instagram is Deeds with Dom. And also, hey, might as well take a stab at this book. So the book is located on Amazon as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Dominique, for all of the information. And you guys make sure you check out the description for everything Dominique just talked about as far as his contact information, where you can buy the book. Also, I usually put some links down below, so you never know what might be down there as far as
Right.
some information about midterm rentals or anything like that. Okay. All right.
Yep.
So make sure you like and subscribe this video, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.